everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name's Aaron Roberts. I'm a founding member of the UK OSINT Community, and I am delighted to be joined here today by Madelaine Thomas, the founder of Image Angel. Madelaine, thanks so much for taking the time to come and speak to me today and telling us a little bit about your mission and how you got here.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, as you say, I'm Madelaine and I'm the founder of Image Angel, which is quite a new type of technology, but I need to tell everyone listening, I didn't build it. I'm not the techie one. I'm the ideas gal.
It's okay. That's how I look at the platform I'm building. I'm Steve Jobs. He's the nerd. That's how I always describe it. So Image Angel, it's a platform designed around identifying, am I correct in like resharing of copyrighted content is a good description?
Yes, kind of. So the main objective of Image Angel is to add a disincentive, let's say, to sharing content. So we're trying to sort of hack the behavioral kind of narrative of someone who is viewing content that is a little bit saucy, spicy, or a little bit culturally sensitive, let's say. So somebody perhaps appearing without a hijab, or a teacher in their bikini, any image or video that is intended to be private just for you and the person receiving it.
Okay. And so the idea here is to reduce piracy, and when piracy occurs, that you're then able to identify the original source of that content.
Yeah, absolutely. So we add invisible data to an image or a frame of a video so that if somebody screenshots it and shares that to a wider audience, we can then find out who they are. But the intention is that they know that that's there and don't want to share that and don't want to put themselves at a risk. So we kind of reduce the risk of sharing content like this in the first place.
Okay, that's really interesting. I know, like in the anti-piracy space in general, like there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. And I used to work for Sky, the broadcaster in the UK, and like their view, it was a lot of money. It was billions and billions of pounds a year that they felt they would has lost revenue as a direct result of pirated content. And I think when you bring that down to creator level, that's, you're talking people's livelihoods. Multi-billion pound companies will probably survive and be okay. But for individuals, actually, it's a huge impact on their way of life and their actual ability to earn money, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I guess if you're a multinational, multi-billion company, you can measure the cost of it and you can measure it in, pounds and pence or dollars. But when you're an individual creator, it's harder to quantify the cost of such a kind of sharing incident. Yeah, it's money. If you're a content creator that's working with commercial content that you then want to go on to sell again, that's sort of a lost view, as it were. And we wouldn't count every single view on a dark web page, for example, to be a lost amount of money, for sure. Those people would probably never have paid for that content anyway, whereas Hollywood would. Hollywood counts every view on a pirated image video as a consumer lost. So what we're not really measuring is the financial impact, because it's so hard to quantify that emotional damage or reputational damage, just personal feeling of feeling like you've lost control or your content's been shared and you have no agency over that anymore. That's what we're trying to quantify, I guess.
I guess taking a step back from that as well, I think like what you just said around, if I think around the topics such as, I guess the quote unquote revenge porn and things like that, it's the impact that has on the individual.
Yeah.
Because it's both that complete loss of control, but also that, huge invasion of privacy and, that breaking of trust as well, which is significant. So I guess the question ultimately, if I try to work my way backwards is, so what brought Image Angel to the fore and what led you to this path? And I guess effectively, because it's an OSINT webinar, how do you perceive that open source intelligence can help with this mission that you're on?
Yeah. So the kind of origin story is a bit strange and unique. So I have a very well-established career as a dominatrix, which was a 10-year career. And it truly was a career. I sort of started off in quite small niches and then, press and interesting articles and writing for, you know, agony aunt almost for people's sexual exploration. So it was certainly a career. I mean, it was wonderful and varied and life enhancing, not just for me, but for the people who I would engage with. And during that time, I had the moment that no sex worker or content creator wants, which is when someone sends you a message and says, "Is this you?" Knowing full well that it probably is you. And those messages contain links to content that you've previously shared in, you know, private settings that has been shared in a much broader and much more harmful way. So, yeah, I had the message, "Is this you?" And it totally rocked my world. I knew that it was possible. I knew that it was happening. But what I didn't realize was the scale and the impact of what I was about to go through. So I wasn't entering into the industry with a naivety thinking it would never happen or could never happen. I just didn't realize how harmful it could be. Going through that set off a chain of events of me believing it was my fault. And I still live with that shame. I still think it would never have happened. I mean, it's factually true. It would never have happened if I hadn't have originally shared those images. However, I should be allowed to share a private image with an individual. But yeah, so it set off a chain of events, which meant that I thought there is no way out for me. There is no way of me living shame-free anymore. This is my life. I'm defined by this. And it took me to the darkest points of being. And in coming out of those, I realized I'm not the one to blame. I've been the victim of something that should never have been allowed to happen in the first place. I should never have had the opportunity to become a victim of this. And I realized that there was essentially a gap in the market for a product that could protect people while still remaining kind of fairly sort of obvious, fairly cheap and accessible to people. And that's when I started to look at solutions for protecting the images and videos that people send. And it had to be intersectional. It had to work for good girls and bad girls, I guess. And it had to be cheap. It had to be fast. It had to be invisible. All of these wonderful things. And technology slowly developed alongside my need and my passion to change the way things were. And that led me to look at invisible watermarking on images and video. And I think I like to think back to, there's this study by Cornish and Clark, and there's a quote, and it says, if somebody believes that they're being watched, they're much less likely to do harm. And I'm absolutely murdering that quote. It's not verbatim. But essentially, if you think someone's watching you as you put your coffee cup back in the shared community kitchen that you work in, or you put your trolley back at the supermarket, if you think someone's watching you, you're much more likely to do the right thing and do the better thing for society as a whole. So the same goes for content distribution. If you believe that it could come back to you, if you believe and you've seen evidence of the harm to the distributor, then you're much less likely to be the one distributing that content non-consensually.
That makes sense.
The feedback that we've had from people who consume this kind of content go, absolutely. I mean, I would never share this. This is firstly, an abhorrent crime, but now it's going to come back to me and I can be traced. No way. So, yeah.
So I guess it's that point you just made there where you see like the use of like open source intelligence to help identify the perpetrators and then engage, I guess.
Yeah.
Presumably it'd be law enforcement at the end of the day, right?
Well, it's a difficult thing, isn't it? Because what I don't want to do is create a product that then ties up lots of policing time. You know, I realise that the impact of this crime, whilst important and sort of life-changing for me, is not a vitally important crime for police forces to solve. They're not going to change the way they do things and focus all of their energy and resources on this. I understand that. And I don't want to add to that like labour within police forces. So what I want to do is create a way that firstly deters this crime from happening in the first place. Done. And then if the crime is to take place, there's a really swift and kind of almost civil redress to this solution without having to tie up lots of police resources. so that we're dissuading people from doing the crime in the first place, meaning less police time is even needed to investigate things like this. And then if we're able to, have a really easy solution. And that should always be survivor-led. So whatever the content creator or the person whose content has been shared non-consensually, whatever they believe is the right kind of redress for this, that's the solution that we encourage the platforms or social media sites to take. And this can work from anything from a nursery school, distributing imagery of children on their app so that the parents can view. If I, as a parent, take a screenshot of lots and lots of children, as well as my own, and I share that in a private group, and then it goes further afield, that was my responsibility. I'm the one that non-consensually distributed that image of those people's children. And however they believe I should be kind of redressed for that, that's what happens. So whether that's just a slap on the wrists and a please don't do it again, there was no malice, no ill intent, it was just a simple misunderstanding. Or this is a crime, you have distributed imagery the way you weren't supposed to, this is a copyright. It depends on the crime itself. An artist, for example, they really depend on their livelihood depends on that kind of safety and sanctity of that piece of content being able to be re-commercialized. So an artist may be much more financially impacted when their piece of content is non-consensually distributed to be manufactured for a gain. And therefore, that's an infringement of copyright. And in that way, it would be much more kind of imperative that there is a financial redress on that. But it totally depends on the individual who's at the kind of victim stage of this, how it's impacted them.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess presumably as well, it's really hard to quantify that in a way that you could make completely repeatable, because like you say, every use case would be different.
Yeah.
And whether it's somebody who creates adult content that is a victim of piracy, or if it, like you said, like if it's somebody whose pictures of children have been shared for completely innocuous, innocent reasons, like, oh, look how cute little Jimmy was today at play school.
Yeah.
Like those are very, very different, I guess. Now I was going to use the word narrative, which might be incorrect, but like the divergence of intent is very, very different.
Yeah.
And I guess ultimately, now I said law enforcement before, I think you're completely right. Actually, a lot of this time it's going to come down to, it's probably a cease and desist kind of approach.
Potentially.
Maybe more than it would be like a legalities enforced. Unless, of course, the content that's being shared is of an illegal nature, by which point they wouldn't be using a service such as yours to protect it.
Well, exactly. And I think that's important to recognize. I presented this solution to a hackers group at B-Sides Cymru. And I'm presenting, it was the most bizarre experience of my life, you know, as someone who has always spoken to people online, but standing up and presenting to people who are potentially kind of my audience as a dominatrix. It was like, I'm now presenting the solution to almost catch you. It felt bizarre, but I had lots of people commenting saying, well, I could get around this. You know, I'm a hacker, I can get around this. And I know that. I'm well aware that this is not a solution that's going to stop a really determined and really experienced person in kind of the technical space that is going to go around this. I appreciate that, and I know that. But what it is going to do is add little layer of friction to just your casual, foolish, accidental sharer. And I do believe that it's going to impact the way we see and value content on a much broader scale. So instead of just, you know, it's just a picture, just share it. We have to start realizing that this is a private moment or a person that I need to respect, regardless of if I know them or not. I'm just not going to reshare that because I don't want to be part of that chain of problems and you know, that societal understanding that what does it matter? So I do believe that it's going to have a wider impact, and then hopefully that will have a trickle down effect. When you hear that somebody somewhere was in trouble because of what they did, you're then going to be a little bit more careful and cautious about the way you are sharing content.
Yeah, I think a really interesting point as well around that is when presenting somewhere like a B-Sides, that's a really niche community of people that specifically work in cybersecurity or have a level of interest in cybersecurity.
Yeah.
And somebody's saying, I think I could probably get around whatever you're implementing. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. Like,
Yeah.
it's not for us to say. But ultimately, that's a really specific, there's probably more people there that would feel that way than actually the general population. And I think whenever we think about things, we always have this level of guilty knowledge about something because this is what we focus on. So like for me as a cyber security professional, I probably have more awareness and knowledge around things and methods, things in ways things get broken or can be circumvented.
Yeah.
Than my friends who don't really use computers.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
then I would act like they're the ones that are stupid. When actually, no, it's just like I wouldn't know how to run, educational policy is an example of one of my friends is involved in. I wouldn't have a clue about that. So it's that thing around actually the general public, by and large, are, I guess, I'm going to use the word stupid, but I'm going to use quotation marks with that. It's not that people are stupid. It's just that people are focused on very different things. And therefore, as a collective, we're probably not as big brained as we'd like to think we are. But actually, we all have like specialist areas of knowledge and focus where, and in this particular use case, most people that are online and accessing whatever the content is, if they're accessing it in a way that they know is not, let's say legitimate, like they're doing that because, that's what they're looking for. It's not because they're specifically going, right, how do I hack the invisible watermark? I remember, it must be 20 years ago. I can't remember. I want to say it's Sony Pictures started implementing a thing where if you were watching a pirated movie, the audio would cut out after like 15, 20 minutes or something, depending on what device you were playing it on. Right. And it's like things like that, where it's like you're just increasing the friction to access.
Making an annoyance, making doing wrong annoying. I can steal all this content, but first I need to, or after that I need to. It's so much more friction than just steal the content. Yeah. Yeah.
No, for sure. And I think there's a lot of ways that can be kind of fun and entertaining as well. Like I know there's a few instances in like video game piracy where the developers have proactively implemented things. So like if like some sort of verification check is not quite right, like the game fundamentally breaks, but it's funny. And like, it's just like, it's like you've done it to yourself, really. Yeah. And I think that's quite funny. I got another great example was a hip hop artist in the UK called Scroobius Pip.
And I recognize that name. Yeah.
He released a solo album, again, probably about 15 years ago. But then he also released a pirate version of it. And it's just him talking throughout the whole thing. And at one point, he's watching Sky Sports News and he's talking about football transfers during the song. And it's like, please buy the album.
Yeah, I know you want to hear
I'm going to rap this little bit. Here's a little bit of this verse. There you go. That was good, wasn't it? You should buy the album.
I love that.
And that's really funny. But I guess when it comes to doing it at scale and with technology, ultimately it's kind of hard to create like those annoyances for each individual content. And rather, you're right, like just by making those slight annoyances or making it that much harder or much more likely that you could be identified and therefore you could then be liable to some extent is probably deterrent enough, I think, for most people.
I mean, in the adult industry, the terminology of leaked content is so popularized and so searched for that people will leak their own content and then add in a link to the correct, paid for platform to encourage people who are, doing the searching for such and such leaked content. They stumble across the correct link to then funnel them back into the correct kind of system. It's that much of a colloquial understanding that we are hacking our own kind of SEO for our anti-searches. It's bizarre. And I've even done it myself with my leaked content. If you go to search for my leaked content, you'll find the leaked content that I intentionally leaked so that you're seeing imagery that I want you to see. So then you then click the link that takes you to the right path. But I shouldn't have to hack the system. I should be able to just be safe. And these workarounds, unfortunately, they are a byproduct of a society that's a little bit skewed towards entitlement and getting stuff because they want it. And like the scrupulous pip, leaking their own content. It's genius, brilliant, but you shouldn't have to do that. You shouldn't have to go that extra mile to be able to say, here's my actual content that I want you to listen to. I know you love this song, but go and buy it. So it's such a shame that we have to do that. It's ingenious that we do, but I think it's about time that the platforms that are profiting from Scrupulous Pip's album, they should be putting in the protections to make sure that people can't go through the back door and access the content without going through the right channels.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess like that point you just made there where like you're intentionally leaking things. And I guess at that point, it's not, I guess leaking is probably a misnomer.
Yeah.
But ultimately, what am I doing? I'm releasing some almost like promotional material to guide you back to where I want you to go. And invariably, if you want to buy my content, like that's where you can do it. And that makes sense. And I guess, do you find as well, I guess, particularly around like the adult industry, that a lot of the major service providers in that space, do you think they are doing enough, or do you think, or are they on like, I guess they're probably all on a journey, particularly I'm thinking like the most established platforms and websites, but do you think they are doing enough to support the creators in that space?
I think they are, they're on a challenge. They're having a challenge themselves. I don't think that when platforms were sort of the origin story of the platform was necessarily thinking of the ways in which it could become a threat. They were just thinking, oh, this is great, we're just going to go along with the journey. And that is the kind of nature of creating a business. Yes, you think about those threats, but you don't have the money to harm yourself against those threats at the outset, because you're too busy thinking, I've got to get my product off the ground, I've got to get my minimum viable product, I've got to move through this, and then I go to my second stage of funding. I'm sorry. But it should be part of the initial idea. And how are we going to be thinking about how this is diverse? How is this going to be used as a threat or against the kind of status quo of what we're trying to do? That threat detection should be built in from the beginning. And I wonder, why is there not some kind of funding where you can get a grant for threat detection or threat mitigation at the beginning of your build? Imagine if a big platform was given a grant to say, you pay this back, for example, when you reach this much money, but what we want you to do is build in mechanisms at this stage that will protect your journey going forward. Like, for example, with the development of AI. Here's a grant. You must spend this exclusively on protecting what could come, the harm that could come from this. Spend this money on detecting and protecting and kind of red teaming what could go wrong. But it's always the afterthought, isn't it? It's always, we've built it and then the harm starts to happen. There's no initial kind of phase of wondering, how could this be used against us? Because you're so focused on getting it off the ground, getting people in. And I've seen this happen to many, specifically adult platforms, because in adult spaces, there's always like the new innovation, the next best thing. And I look at them and I look at this new innovation and I think, you have no idea the potential harm that one great idea could cause. And this is the same for anything, like a child safety development, an artificial intelligence app that does this. How can this be used in the negative, in the kind of I don't know what you call it. Is there a name for it? Does this already exist? I don't know. And that's why I'm trying to learn from my experience with Image Angel. And every time we build something, develop something, I try and think, and how could this be used against those people? And how could this be hacked? And how could this be a potential negative? And it's probably hampering the development, but I think it's better to develop slow and not break things, develop fast and break things.
No, for sure. And I think a point you just made there, I think is really interesting, because talking around child safety, and like, I'm sure you're very aware, like the Online Safety Act in the UK, the changes that went through earlier this year, which now forces age verification on platforms. And subsequently the increased use of VPNs and the Tor browser.
Yeah.
And from my perspective on that, I've been quite vocal about this. It's like, I think it's a really short-sighted implementation to try and fix the problem. It's a square peg in a round hole, and ultimately we're not protecting children by blocking content. And most of my grievances are actually around the notion of blocking content off like sites like Twitter and Wikipedia and stuff like that. And I'm like, that to me feels like, well, that's clearly not going to protect children in any meaningful way. But actually what we've done is we've created this implementation where kids are not dumb. They will look to work around it, because if they want to see some boobs on the internet, like, they'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And like, they're much more attuned to technology, I think, than most politicians. And I think often we'll get these like implementations at like a strategic level, which sound great. But actually, when you break it down, it's actually, what have we done? We've created this whole ecosystem now where we're probably going to start driving children into parts of the internet like we never intended for them to go, because that's exactly what we're trying to avoid. And the situation just exacerbates. And I think that's really interesting. And I think where Image Angel comes in with stuff like that is actually, if you're then able to identify perpetrators behind that content and the platforms where that content is being shared, maybe it's those kind of mechanisms where we can then start to take, I guess, more action against platform holders as well, especially on sites where either engagement with legal policy and stuff like that are not, should we say, encouraged or supported because the sites are dodgy by nature.
There's kind of 2 points. The second point to this is Image Angel and how it can show you, without realizing the metadata or the hidden things within the image, it can show you just by having the presence of this technology. It can show you whether this is a consensually distributed for the public consumption or privately sent and therefore should be kept in a private channel. It can show you which of those it is without kind of digging in, finding out who I am, who the person is, was this consensual distribution. Simply by the presence of the watermark itself says this was sent privately. So if this technology were to become a more widely used and kind of widely referenced and widely checked type of technology, even if it's not just Image Angel, if it has an invisible watermark, that means this was sent privately. And therefore, the binary question, can I upload this to Twitter and show my followers? Does it have a watermark? Yes, no. Should this be uploaded? Yes, no. That's simple as it gets. If it has this mark in, it is not to be distributed widely, and therefore it shouldn't be distributed widely. There should be a block on upload, almost like a more modern update of the watermarking, the hash matching systems. But to go back to your point around the Online Safety Act, I agree in that it was short-sighted, but it does add smaller friction, and I think we need that friction. My child is 9. And whilst he knows how to use technology systems that I don't get, I can't use the Switch, for example. If he searches for me and my product, Image Angel, there are people who wish to make his search hijacked by using the imagery that was shared of me non-consensually in the beginning. And if he searches for my name, it won't show him those nefarious pictures, because it's considered pornography, and therefore he is fractionally safer. And in that way, I believe it's a good thing. I feel a little bit safer. It's not the answer, and that's why the Online Safety Act and actually most of the online safety movements across the world require that layered protection, that not only the mitigating kind of a priority offence is a good thing, but also asking for that offence to happen is now a crime. So it's kind of like you can't access it and you can't request it, means there's a kind of clear gap in the middle where you can exist safer on the internet. So it's not the solution to the problem at all. And yes, it is potentially siphoning. In fact, I know it's siphoning people into kind of VPNs, and my non-wanted content, my non-consensual content, is being viewed more than it was before. I can see the views are stacking up. But for that one moment where my son is excited about Image Angel and wants to learn about it, he's not confronted with imagery that he shouldn't be seeing if he were to just click safe search off. And that I'm thankful of, although it is not a catch-all for sure.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, right? I don't know anyone, and if I did, I'd probably disassociate with them, but anyone who would go, no, we shouldn't be protecting children on the internet. But I guess ultimately it's how are we doing that? What's the approach? And I think one thing I guess all governments are guilty of this and being bad at it. It's like, nobody ever takes like a careful, considered approach to implementing things or engaging like the relevant people who could actually bring some of that knowledge and experience to bear and actually, do something for good, the greater good. And I think even the simple things like, well, okay, if we're going to use like Google search, why don't we just make that you have to have an account? And that account is tied to like your date of birth and parental controls. And, you literally set like for your son, like, well, he's not old enough to view any content I deem like this. Google has safe search. So Google is very capable and adept at being able to find content and go, that looks a bit spicy, or that looks inappropriate for a young audience, and filter it out of the search. And, I think where we probably should get to is a point where we're actually keeping platforms more accountable as well, and ensuring that they are able to implement things in a safe way for all users.
Yeah.
And I think some of the things you see on social media around the act around, people who want to maybe unalive themselves or are seeking support in trying to avoid that situation, being gated out of support forums to try and help those issues.
I don't know. I mean,
it's difficult. It's not easy.
The other day, I'm just gonna put this out here. So the journey with Image Angel has not been easy, and I have moments of thinking this is the worst thing in the whole wide world, and I'm so unhappy. And I searched, how do I make myself feel better? Like, I feel awful. I feel suicidal, and it came up with Call Samaritans. Like, it didn't show me an option to go on various chat rooms and channels to find ways of doing it. It showed me a solution, a help solution. There are ways of going to find that, but the less easy it is to come across those, the better. If I'm determined enough to do something, I'm going to go and do it. But if I'm just a kind of wandering, having a bad day, I shouldn't be confronted with those answers. And I don't feel like, in my experience of searching that, I couldn't get the help I needed at that time. And I think that goes for quite a lot of things. I think I'm gay. How do I feel? What is this moment I'm feeling? If I search that, now I haven't. I don't know. Does it come up with LGBTQ advice? How to, understand yourself? It should do, because that is not a type of content that should be protected under the Act, because that is not pornography or harmful to children. Some would say it is, but it is not. But what we should do as well is empower young people and adults as well to understand what it's like to feel suicidal or feel gay or feel of these things that are considered outside the norm. I'm kinky. What do I do? The word kinky should not be banned, There has to be a measured approach to implementing things like the Online Safety Act. And I believe that, I've read it, I've studied it, I've read it hundreds of times, and I'm referencing it all the time. In my interpretation of it, there are platforms that perhaps are age-gating content that is not considered a priority harm or not considered harmful to children, and they've perhaps taken that too far to be erring on the side of caution, and that's not right. Access to LGBTQ rights and suicide prevention helplines is not harming children.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think again, I've seen things, and it's all on social media, so the level of truth you have to apply to these things varies. But like where you mentioned now, people who think maybe they might be gay, maybe they're transgender, and being able to not find support mechanisms again feels like that's missed the entire point of what the Act is designed to do.
Yeah,
and it's one of those things. And I think to bring this back to, I guess, the actual conversation, like. This is why you exist, right, as a company, and why you're building a technology. It's about re-empowering people and giving people the authority to decide how their content should be shared and where it should be shared.
Yeah.
And when applying that in the broader context of the internet, it either should be up to the platform holder or the creator who decides, like, this is suitable. This is something that maybe should be gated behind some level of authorization, whether that's a paywall, whether that's an age verification system, and things like that. And I think it's really difficult. And I think to tie that back into like open source intelligence, like it must be really difficult to, I guess historically, if somebody has shared your content non-consensually, they're probably doing that behind a pseudonym or, a false alias. And therefore, who was it? I've got no idea. Unless you've only got one paying customer who's received something, and the likelihood of that is probably slim. So bringing that back and actually having that method where you might be able to work back a watermark to go, that watermark applied to this video on this user.
Yeah.
I think actually that's a really massive deterrent, because, there are probably other checks you can then do at a platform level where you go, this user is sharing things illegitimately. And then if that's their line of business because, they're posting on platforms where they get ad revenue or whatever, then that's a really great deterrent. And I think seeing where your mission is heading, I think that's really, really interesting and super powerful.
I'm quite sure the person that shared my imagery was not a super smart, tech savvy individual. I think they were just using what they could while they had access to it and, screenshot, crop, put it over there. I don't think that they were as techie as some are, and certainly some are. I kind of feel like, why? What did you gain from that? Did you gain kudos? Did you gain money? Because I can't see either in the way I'm looking at this content. I can't see you gaining anything from it. The content as well is hosted outside of Digital Millennium copyright zone, so I can't get it removed. They don't conform to online safety pressures from different localities because they simply don't exist in that legal zone. So it's still there, it's still able to view. And the one thing that I'm so proud of Image Angel is that if that technology had been on that content at that time, okay, I may not be able to get it taken down. I may not be able to find out who that person is. But what I could do is look inside it and perhaps find out the user, and then I can ban that user from accessing things again. And all right, it's probably a minor inconvenience, but at least it's something. Something is better than nothing, because right now, I don't know who that person is. They can come back again and again. They could be talking to me right now,
Yeah.
I didn't mean you, by the way.
It was not me. But I think that point you made there, I think, is exactly it, isn't it? It's like what you're doing is re-empowering the victim to have a bit more control and a bit more authority. And like I said, if you can't really do much because it's held, on a server in like, I don't know, presumably like Russia is probably somewhere commonly used. Like you probably can't do a lot there unless you keep badgering them and eventually maybe somebody takes some action on a website. If they even have a point of contact on the site. But if you can then go, well, actually, I think it was this user because I have all this supporting information, just that small empowerment there is, well, I can ban them.
Yeah.
And, then on platforms as well, I'm sure there's things like IP bans and stuff for users as well, which can be implemented. So that just extra level of empowerment, whilst is it going to stop the issue? No. Will they create a new account and find a new way around? Maybe. But at least if you have this deterrent, somebody who's not determined or persistent in that way, that should be enough to make them reconsider what they've done and stop them from doing it again.
It's a small amount.
I guess ultimately, for an individual content creator, that must be almost as much power as you can really get in this sort of situation.
Yeah, it is.
I guess.
But we do have to be careful that we don't then create a system of alternative accounts, So I know that you can purchase an account that is fully verified, loads of followers, and then you can use that account to do various things. I'm fully aware of that. Then how do we crack down on that? Because that is a symptom, again, of this possibility that you can use content, use it and use it and use it. So if we find out who that account is, we can ban them, but there's going to be another one. So how do we stop that from happening? How do we make that a deterrent? How do we then, any harm that could come from this as a workaround, how do we make sure we're not encouraging that as a system to navigate around this? So there are things that we need to consider in the kind of broader safety and access kind of space. Yeah, that's something that we're working with platforms to do. You know, how do we make sure that this works as intended and doesn't just cause sort of secondhand market of secondhand accounts?
Yeah, I guess if I think about this with my intelligence analyst hat on, we're talking around like, one is a tactical level response is block that account. But then you also have your strategic piece at the top of that, which is engaging the platforms themselves and working with them to understand, right, okay, well, we've identified this account is doing something that we don't agree with. We need you to take some level of action on that account. And then it's up to them to decide that, is that a full IP blocked? Is there other ways they can identify that individual? And presumably, I don't know how it works with like banking information and stuff, but if somebody's paying for content and then sharing it like non-consensually, the platform holder must be able to see like at least partial card details being used for transactions.
Yeah.
So at that point, then surely you can start to infer that maybe this person has these other alt accounts which they are using.
Yeah, and the problem becomes like that secondary account that of using stolen data and stolen cards to then access this content. If we can stop one card from accessing, great. Does it then create a marketplace for secondary accounts? Somewhat. I think there's already that marketplace is already there. But if we can try and impact those secondary accounts in some way, that's a good thing.
I think it's an incredible mission, and the ability to empower individual content creators, regardless, I guess, of their niche, is really quite interesting. And until we spoke about doing this webinar, I never really stopped to really think about the impact of like piracy on an individual. And I guess when I think about it, like when you do see people posting content online that clearly they don't own, often it's reposting people who have probably millions of followers. And therefore, you know, one video being shared is probably not a huge dent. But actually, when you break that down to smaller content creators who are reliant on it for an income and are living a fairly, normal life, it must be like the potential impacts are huge. And then that's before you take into account, like you've mentioned, like the personal impacts and the emotional impact and the distress that causes.
Yeah. I think that distress is probably on a scale. Like if you're a huge content creator, I mean, I don't want to say a name, but like Pamela Anderson, right? When they had their video leaked, that must have been a horrific, moment for them. If we just kind of take that as the status quo and we go, well, they must have been fine with it. They're such a big celebrity. How do we know that? How do we know that they were okay with that? They probably weren't. They probably just had to be okay with it. But there are celebrities on the same level who deserve protection just because, they had their content hacked or they chose to send a nude to someone. It doesn't mean that because they have a large following, sharing one image of them is okay. It probably isn't that harmful because they have so many people doing the same thing. But it doesn't mean it's right. But yes, when it's an individual, small-time creator who's just doing a little bit of extra pictures just to get by or is creating a bit of artwork just to get by, when you lose ownership of that, when that harm comes back to you, it's much more impactful than a big creator losing control of something that has been reposted time and time again. The harm is the same, but perhaps the impact on the individual is larger.
No, for sure. And I guess like you said, like the scale as well, it's like, and because individuals are different as well, right? So you're impacted by something being shared non-consensually, and there is a level of impact that had on you. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the next person that happens to the impact is the same. It's all up to that individual. And and in some cases, I guess it is like life destroying or, has a huge impact on them in the short to medium term because people send something to like their family or something like that, which is abhorrent.
Yeah.
And ultimately it's like being able to empower those people to take some action back must be a really rewarding place to be. And I think having that startup dilemma and founder dilemma where you're like, what the hell am I doing in my life?
Yeah.
Am I sure I'm doing the right thing? Do I want to do this anymore? Do I want to go get a minimum wage job and never have to think and try to use my brain in a role which is very repetitive and easy for me? Like, we all go through that journey, I think. I certainly do most days.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of bizarre that I'm even in this position, 10 years as a dominatrix. I was loving life. I was thriving. Yes, I had this harm happen to me and it was the worst moment. But actually the harm is more impactful on my children and the potential that they could be exposed to that. So it's not just me, it's those around me too. And I always kind of think like, my mum is an artist. Her content's been copied time and time again. The difference is her content doesn't show her naked body, but mine does. And, my son, he's impacted because of the potential that he could be exposed to this, or that someone could search for me and then see this, where he should never be in that position to be harmed by something that is a choice of mine, or that is a choice of a criminal. I guess, my choice was never for him to be confronted with this, but that is now a possibility because of the nature of what's happened to me. But I truly believe that there is a way that this can be impacting people at scale. And especially when we think about young men who are exposed to the potential of being sextorted because of content that they have sent. If I, as an individual on a dating app, for example, send a nude image of myself to a potential love interest and then they use that against me, what I can say to them if they have Image Angel is, well, you're only exposing yourself. You're going to put this image out there and you're going to show people this image of me. But in doing so, you're exposing yourself. And whether or not they have used a fake account with fake data and, that alternative content or alternative contact, what am I trying to say? The alternative account to access that's where the harm now lies. Can we stop those people joining these platforms with false accounts, false cards, to be able to truly attribute who that person is receiving that data and that content? If we can do that, we can stop that. We can stop things like sextortion. And that has literally taken lives. The amount of children and young adults who have chosen that ending their life is an easier route than accepting that this is happening to them and that is a crime. If we can give them something that is a bit more support, like, don't be afraid if this happens to you, because we can find out exactly who they are. They're incriminating themselves as well as sharing your nudes. And that feels like a hopeful place to be, although it is extremely scary. But I didn't set out to do this I never felt like I was an entrepreneur. I never felt like I had a business brain or a techie brain, but I'm doing what I can because I didn't see anyone else doing it.
Yeah, I think that's really empowering. And that point you just made there around like sextortion as a crime, I went down a rabbit hole recently of looking into a group that goes by the Col, and mostly because I kept saying references to it. And I was just curious. I was like, I don't really understand. I haven't read any news reports, but I see people reference this group a lot. And I went down this little rabbit hole and trying to understand what they do. And it's literally, it's both sextortion of children, emotional manipulation, getting them to physically harm themselves, and in some cases to kill themselves. It's horrific. And when you start looking like, why are these people doing this? And at the scale they're doing it, things like in the US, every single state has an active investigation, like a federal level, into this group or one of its like subsidiaries. And that's true as well in like the UK. It's increasingly common. In Australia, it's increasingly common. And it's abhorrent that that people do this to children who are just probably lonely and looking for some connection online, let alone like the impacts that this then having on not only the individual but their family and all of that. And it's disgusting. And being in a position where you can try and support individuals who maybe they're manipulated to do something, but if you can have something where Image Angel is literally ubiquitous on like a device, for example, suddenly you shared an image and that's okay. It's not the end of the world, really. It's not. But you at least have these extra steps now. You can go, well, if you share this of me, you're going to be at risk of being identified. And then because you're encouraging me to do these things and I'm 12 years old, I'm 14 years old, suddenly that's a very much more serious situation than the case of, okay, you've taken somebody's pictures and you've shared them elsewhere. I guess just trying to reduce even those levels of crimes as well. Like the whole mission for me is really inspiring.
Yeah.
So I think you're doing some great stuff.
It does bring you back to the kind of question of what benefit does content without some kind of information in it have? What benefit is it to not have Image Angel? I truly believe a platform that doesn't add in some kind of protection on the imagery and content that's being shared is not doing enough. Because if I can create this system as someone who doesn't have experience in this technical field, if I can do it, then it's possible. And I've made it really easy for platforms to be able to add this in. It's an API, plug it in, play, go. It's super easy. And the unique thing about Image Angel as well is that it's one place that a victim can go. Instead of going to Twitter, hey, I think I've had my image taken, or Tinder, I think I've had my image taken, who was it? You go to one place and we're able to tell you the platform of origin. So you added this to Tinder on this date or this time, and then we contact Tinder. If we were installed on Tinder, we contact Tinder and say, right, this is the solution, this is the system that's happened, the incident, and here's the solution. But right now it's like, oh, I can't remember whether I sent it on, was it Tinder or was it Grindr? I can't remember. I was on both at the same time, and I think I sent it to that person. I think I might have sent it to that person, because it's not just commercial content that's me sending an image on a paid for subscription platform. I may also send that on like Seeking Arrangement or some other platform. I don't know. And I need one place to go to for that one incident and go, help me. And that's where Image Angel comes in. We're one place where a victim of any kind of image-based crime can come.
That's really, really, really awesome stuff.
Yeah.
I'm going to try and be a bit goblin-y here and ask you a little bit about that technical detail. So where you said like it's like a single API that a platform can use, is it then possible that if you were sharing content across several different platforms, like obviously you're sharing a video, would that video receive like the same watermark across platforms? So when I wanted to make Image Angel as accessible as possible, which means we take away the need for the individual to do the work. So it's plugged in platform level. So for example, right now I'm broadcasting to you on my device that's going to you. So this would have the platform mark and your mark as a receiver. So if you were to screenshot your device right now, or anyone watching screenshots, it has their details in as well as the distribution platform. But that's because this is a live video going across this method. Yeah. If I have recorded a video of the sunset and I want to upload that video to Seeking Arrangement, and I want to say, look how beautiful this sunset is, I send it to Seeking Arrangement, it gets watermarked with the Seeking Arrangement watermark, and then whoever receives it. And if I want to send it on Grindr, I send it to Grindr. Those two individual files, they may be the same file, but the two copies of it are now marked in two different ways with two different platforms and whoever has received. So instead of putting the onus on me as the individual to say, this image is an image of a sunset and I'm sending it to XYZ platform, I automatically have that information added to it as I upload it to the platform. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah, and then I guess at a technical level, like you must have like a hash of the original file, which you then cross-reference that against the watermarks.
So we don't keep a hash of the original file because that could be construed as kind of sort of databasing and keeping non-consensual distribution of imagery. So if a child were to send an image of themselves, that is self-generated child sexual abuse material. It's a funny area, right? So we wouldn't want to keep that image. We wouldn't want to keep that on a database. When we upload that, when they upload that piece of content, it goes through our system, watermarks it, and all we know is the information held within that watermark. But we only know the platform mark. So somebody comes to us and they say, this image of the sunset was non-consensually distributed and I'm harmed by this. Obviously, they wouldn't be because it's a sunset, but if it were used for some nefarious reason, we would then look into it. We don't look at the image at all. We look at the data held within the image. So we would then capture that data. We would go, right, this has come from XYZ platform. We contact XYZ platform, we give them that technical identifier and say, this is the data, or this is the data identifier of the person on your platform. So we don't know who that person is, and we can't find that out because we don't hold that data. All we have is a technical identifier that identifies them, whoever who has that information on that account. So if I, for example, realize my content's been distributed, I come to Image Angel, all I need to know as a survivor or as a victim of this is if you can do something. So is there a watermark? Yes, no. That's as much information as you get in that first instance. Then when we look into it further, we then find out the platform. We can contact the platform and say, this is the technical identifier for this person. What do you have on them? Like, do you have something? Have they long gone? Is this years ago? Or is this, is this an active account right now? And then we start the ball rolling of it, kind of what happens next. And depending on what's happened at what stage is then impacting the outcome.
No, that's really interesting. And I think, again, like you're completely right about like the legal system and how complex it is, especially when you're actively working in a space to protect like people that could be vulnerable and the difficulties around that. And it's a really nuanced, difficult topic. And like I've got a lot of friends in law enforcement who, have the same issues and the same challenges. And I think the way you've described that, actually, like taking what's effectively like a simple piece of information and then being able to empower the platforms to take action as well.
Yeah.
Seems like a really like the right balance.
Yeah. And it's a one-stop shop, essentially. You come to us and we can tell you, yes, no, this was provided on a certain platform. And then if it wasn't and we can't help you, we can't give you any data around the image, but what we can do is signpost you to ways to get it taken down, ways to get help, how to, protect yourself from this happening again, even though that is not what should be happening. We shouldn't be having to protect people from this happening. We should be protecting people from stopping doing this. But, what can we do to help you in that moment? One thing that we found really interesting was when we talk about sharing, there's sharing consensually and then there's sharing non-consensually. It shouldn't be called sharing. It should be called something else, like non-consensual distribution instead of, oh, they shared my image. No, they didn't share it. They stole it and they're acting. Theft. Yeah, it's theft and it's a crime against you. It's not sharing. And so that's kind of difficult for us to kind of talk about. But we did see a campaign. There's a campaign by a big charity that basically says, don't share your images. That's a way to stop image theft from happening. Don't share your images. Is that helpful? Is that helpful to anyone to victim blame? No.
Yeah. Like, and it's up to the individual, right? If like I'm choosing to do this, I think this is a career that I can succeed in, and that's my decision to make, and that's how I feel empowered. And like, that's how it should be. It shouldn't be up to somebody to say, well, if you just didn't do it, then the problem goes away, doesn't it? Like, that's not helpful.
Yeah.
And
just don't have a car. And then you'll never be the victim of car theft. It's easy. I don't know why more people don't have cars. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes little to no sense.
Yeah. Oh, you were shining your car. You must have wanted someone to take it. You must have liked it. You wanted people to look at it. I see.
Yeah, I think when you take, obviously, like, the subject matter is often a difficult one to talk about in public. So people get all like, ooh, but that's a technical term. But I think when you take the absurdity of like things like that and you apply it to a different situation, you start to understand like, there's no way this makes sense in any logical sense.
Yeah, if we go back to like Cerebulous Pip, I hope I'm saying that right, and we look at that, you made a track and you wanted people to listen to it and you gave them some for free. You tempted them into buying your track. How sexy, how saucy of you, how attractive of you to do that, to use your skill, your voice, and to create a song that was so visually and kind of tune and appealing. And of course you wanted it taken. It's just so bizarre to say that.
Yeah, like it's nonsensical. But I guess ultimately, whilst like the events that happened to you like shouldn't have happened in the first place, I guess it's fair to say actually what's done is it's kicked you off on this journey now where you have this company and now you're doing something like for the benefit of society as a whole, which is really empowering.
Yeah, it feels cool.
Which is, an inspiring story as well.
It's cool, but it's also really scary. And half the time I don't know what I'm doing. And sometimes I think it's okay to be kind of truthful in that vulnerability. We're having conversations with huge platforms that people never get to speak to. And I'm putting it out on a level and just saying, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. And I think that vulnerability is really important, because I could bullshit, but that's not true. That's not right. That's not appropriate. I don't know. But what I do know is how to find the answer. And that's a skill I have, at least, finding the answers to things. Like, I guess this is also a bit of a call to arms. Like, I need people to want this solution on systems, so that if they ever do become the victim of something like this, they can use our tech.
And how would people reach out to you and contact you to achieve that?
If we have our website, imageangel.co.uk. We couldn't buy .com; it was too expensive. Because also,
Bid now.
I've been self-funding this, so everything is all funded by me. We've had a small bit of funding in the recent months, but yeah, we're on a shoestring. But if you go to imageangel.com/.co.uk/technical, you can request that this tech be installed in a platform like OnlyFans or Twitter. And if you just want to contact us on any social platform, it's at imageangel.
Nice. Well, Madelaine, thanks so much for your time this morning. Like, it's been really interesting talking to you.
Thank you.
And I think hearing both, like, your story from like what happened to you, but also like where it's led, and how that now is like, you've taken like what could be a really negative, impactful moment, and you've turned it into something where you can empower potentially like an untold number of people by giving them a little bit of that power back, right? That's really cool and really, really inspiring. And I imagine this will be a webinar that gets quite a lot of views, because I think both the mission is really interesting, the way you're tackling it, but also like the subject matter is like, people will find it interesting because, it sounds spicy and saucy, but actually ultimately what we're talking about and what we're really doing is enabling individuals to feel better empowered and feel more secure in what they're doing and how they're going about their daily lives. Yeah. And I think that's an incredible mission.
Thank you so much.
So thanks so much.
Thanks for featuring me.
Anytime. And hopefully we'll get you in person at an event.
Yeah, cool.
At some point in the future.
That'd be cool. Thank you.
Great. And for everyone else watching, thank you so much. We will see you very soon for our next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.